Gentlemen, my guest for this episode is none other than my wife, Emily McKay. If you really find yourself enjoying this episode and want to hear more from Emily and I on dating and relationships in particular, go ahead and check out the X and Y on the Fly podcast, which is found in a different category on Apple Podcasts. That's Society and Culture / Relationships. And we've got brand new episodes of that particular podcast coming up real soon as well. So enjoy this episode and enjoy X and Y on the Fly as well.
Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
Hey there, gentlemen. Welcome again to another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay, at Scot McKay on Twitter, Real Scot McKay on Instagram, Scot McKay on YouTube. You can find us on the web at www.mountaintoppodcast.com. And as always, the Facebook group is the Mountaintop Summit. Today, we're going to have what I'm going to call the second installment in what may be an annual occasion, and that's having my lovely wife, Emily, on as my guest co-host. Now, you may already know her from listening to our other podcast, the X and Y on the Fly podcast, but I think sometimes it's fun to have her on to discuss certain topics because they lend themselves very well to, let's just say, husband and wife conversation. Today, we're going to talk about conflict and disagreement in relationships. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to my lovely and talented wife, Emily McKay.
Hello, I'm honored to be here again. It's
an honor. Well,
yes.
It's an honor to live with you and wake up next to you every day.
Well, should we have a fight about that?
No, I think we're in agreement.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you'd probably feel equally honored.
I do.
Yeah, as long as we both brushed our teeth.
Okay, I'm not going to disclose that one.
That would be pretty dishonorable. And when one of us gets to snoring. That's dishonorable also.
I just roll you over, or you roll me over.
If you roll me out of bed, that would be a dishonorable discharge.
A kick, hi-ya! Right off the bed.
Oh, yeah. Put some martial arts into it. Makes it a little kinkier. As you can see already, we disagree with each other about nearly everything.
Absolutely.
That's a complete, utter lie. Anybody who's ever done coaching with us realizes that, whichever one of us you talk to, both of us are probably going to agree vehemently with each other on just about everything.
But there are times when we do have disagreements. And, that's what brings us to this podcast, which is why you have me as a guest. How do we handle conflicts and disagreements?
Well, I think the first place to go with that is if you're dating someone and you're disagreeing and finding conflict in the basics that make you who you are. Things like whether to eat meat or not, where you are politically, what your faith is like.
How many kids you want.
Yeah, how to raise those children, or how you're going to handle finances, etc. If one of you doesn't want to fly on airplanes and the other one wants to travel nomadically all over the world, thank goodness we're in agreement on that one.
Absolutely. So I'd say the things that matter the most, you and I do agree upon.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely necessary if you're going to enter into a long-term relationship with someone and expect it to work. Because if there are foundational differences, then, you're going to be fundamentally incompatible.
Right. And then there's times when it's hard to address those questions, especially when you're dating, because you're afraid, what if you don't agree upon things? Is it going to make or break this relationship? And it can be really scary, especially if you really like this guy or if you really like this girl.
Yeah, and a lot of times people don't have a whole lot of options, and they finally have someone in their life who they feel they're attracted to, and they're almost afraid to have these conversations, like you're saying, lest they find a deal breaker and, oops, they're incompatible. So they'd almost rather sweep it all under the carpet and hope it never comes up rather than dealing with it relatively soon in the relationship and then moving on. People are, really driven by fear a lot, aren't they?
Well, that, and they're also hopeful. They're hopeful that the person will come around to their ways and go, well, okay, I changed my mind. We can make this work out. It'll figure itself out. We'll find a way. We'll force this.
I've heard both men and women kind of posed as the ones who look for fixer-uppers. Men think they can kind of lead women into wherever they want to lead them, whatever that means. And sometimes it's actually true. But you also hear a lot about women finding a guy who they're going to train. They're going to make him give up his motorcycles and kind of mold him into the kind of husband who is going to be more compliant. And I think it's a mistake, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, to think you're going to change someone to become the kind of person you can be compatible with. All of these situations, Emily, sow massive seeds of discord later on, and it's hard to have a relationship with someone who you just don't agree with on a basic level. And I think it's harder to have a relationship with someone who wants to change you on that same fundamental level.
Well, it has to be very difficult to live every day knowing you're not meeting to that person's expectations. Or worse, they're not meeting your expectations and you're just miserable. And you're hoping and wishing that they will finally come around to doing it your way.
But in the meantime, until that happens, which is probably never, like we just said, someone's settling. Someone's not in the relationship they want to be. Someone wishes they were somewhere else.
Well, the simple solution is you address the issue, see if you can come up with a solution. Sometimes they're solvable. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the deal breakers. Can they be fixed? There are certain things you should never compromise on. And when you both just don't see eye to eye, unfortunately, that's when you have to say, okay, we're not made for each other. There is a Mr. Right or Mrs. Right out there for me. And go and get what actually will make you happy. But if it's something insignificant or something pretty minor, you can have a discussion and say, okay, we disagree with maybe how we spend money. Can we come to an agreement somewhere in the middle that we both can be happy with? Sometimes there's things that we can come to mutual agreements. But the question is, who has to give up?
There's a lot of pride there. Neither partner is going to want to give anything up. And see, that's the thing. What you're talking about here is something that's a lot easier said than done for a whole lot of couples out there. I mean, hey, let's just come to an agreement and hash this out. Well, what if one person says, well, this is non-negotiable? Then it truly is, in the true definition of the word, a deal breaker. I mean, deal breakers are by their very definition non-negotiable. Now, if you have someone out there who's just being immature and unreasonable, like, if your favorite band isn't Coldplay, then don't bother, then that person can just basically die alone someday. They're not, it's just an unreasonable and I would say rather esoteric and downright silly expectation to have. Because look, for example, you listen to completely different music than I do.
Absolutely. I listen to girly music.
Right. It's an unreasonable expectation to not expect me to listen to the kind of music a guy would like to listen to.
But you have to change the radio for me, right?
Well, I should want to change the radio for you because I like you. And I'm okay with you being happy. Now, some people would say, hey, that's a compromise in a relationship. That's sharing. There are plenty of things you and I love to do. You and I love the certain kind of adventure travel that we like. We agree in how we raise our children. We get involved in the same sports as a family. We go on hiking trips. You got me into camping. Right? I got you into BMXing. Because fundamentally, our personalities are similar and compatible. Therefore, interests don't necessarily have to be the same from the get-go when we meet each other. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you like the same exact things I do the day we meet. That didn't matter at all in our case, and it probably wouldn't for anybody else listening either. The simple fact is, if we're cut out of the same mold and we get each other, which I talk about all the time on this show, we just know what's going on in the other person's mind because their mind works somewhat similar to ours at least, then we're going to introduce each other to things and the person may resist and go, oh, you're kind of crazy or that just sounds dumb. But the other partner will go, try it. You might like it. And the next thing you know, I like green eggs and ham, Sam, I am. You know what I mean? It just becomes something that you enjoy as a couple, is introducing each other to things. And voila, you tend to enjoy them mutually.
Right. Well, like BMX, this is something that you're passionate about, and I'm passionate about you. And therefore, that's why I went ahead and went into it, looked at it, and gave it a try. Because it's important to you, it should be important to me.
Well, I think that's a woman thing. I think a lot of times when guys are really passionate into something, the woman will be his biggest cheerleader and maybe even try it. For the guy's part, we want to be supportive of what you're doing. Let's say you're a ballet dancer. I may not jump into doing ballet with you.
Oh, come on. You look great in tights.
Yeah, really.
Or maybe you can get nails done with me.
I thought that was called a dance belt.
Dance belt.
Yeah, the men's tights, that kind of show off your package. I would look good in that.
You would look good in that.
Absolutely. But I'm not about to wear it. So you guys listening, don't fret about that. It ain't happening.
Not even in the bedroom?
Not even. Why would you want me to wear anything in the bedroom?
That is true.
I mean, that thing would kind of get in the way.
Mm.
Anyway, back to reality. Well, that was reality. Back to the fantasy world of this podcast. How about that? So when couples get together, the man should be supportive of what the woman wants to do. Nobody wants to be heavy-handed and manipulative and be a controlling jerk. And that's not gender specific. I mean, men or women can be totally controlling in a relationship. I mean, it happens. But if I love you, if I even like you, and I want you to be happy, you being happy makes me happy. So yeah, when we pick a movie to watch at night, I want something that you're going to enjoy at least as much as I will. And sometimes we share by letting the other person pick a movie that they've been dying to watch.
Especially after I've been trying to pick one out for 2 hours.
Exactly. We have that issue in our family, by the way. It just takes more time to scroll through Netflix or Amazon Prime than it does to actually watch the damn movie. Especially when the kids are involved.
That's the disagreement there, right?
Yeah, exactly. But once we come to an agreement on what to watch, I may make a snarky comment here and there, but it's amazing how often I end up liking the movie that you picked and vice versa.
It does. I hate to admit it, but sometimes I do like what you pick out.
Right, exactly. And then there's the old 5-minute test, which everybody should do.
I like the old 5-minute test.
Yeah, and usually it's amazing how often we agree on the 5-minute test.
Yes, let's give it a 5-minute test. Just try it out. If you don't like it, we'll stop and we'll try something else.
And there have been times where we agreed on the 5-minute test, and then we go back and look at the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and everybody else in the world loved the movie except us.
Yeah, that's happened.
Like Lost in Translation. It was a horrible movie, but everybody else loved it. I mean,
we couldn't survive that thing. We had to quit.
Oh, God, we had to quit.
I needed my time back.
I know. I want my 5 minutes back.
Oh, well.
Anyway, I think we should talk a little bit about what happens when couples actually are in a relationship and then they find that they disagree about something. It has been said by certain dating advice, relationship advice gurus that it's healthy for couples to fight.
Well, fighting and arguing and disagreeing can have a difference.
Well, I would say there's a huge difference between disagreeing, that is having a conflict, and fighting.
Yeah, fighting's not good. When I think of fighting, I'm thinking physical abuse, physical force of some sort.
Well, I doubt those other relationship gurus are thinking that when they say it's healthy for couples to fight. I'm thinking more in terms of insulting each other, having it be acting out in anger. And you and I can get tiffy.
That's pretty forceful.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I'm not talking about coming to fisticuffs with your wife or anything. That's blatantly abuse. I mean, the police get called in those situations.
Maybe it's just short of that.
I guess. I would think way short of that would still be a fight by my definition, especially if the couple has malicious intent towards each other and they're just acting out of hate and anger. We've seen that happen before our very eyes.
True. I mean, that could be name calling and cursing at each other. It could even be the silent treatment.
Oh, yeah, that's a fight.
Oh, that's a pretty hard fight to handle.
Yeah, especially for guys. We don't understand that stealth mode fighting that women do where they just go, nothing. Nothing's wrong.
But there's a language to it.
Explain for these guys.
Okay, so let me tell you how the stealth quiet mode works. When we are really, really, I'll say it again, really angry, sometimes the only thing we have left is to resort to being quiet. And this is our way of trying to get your attention. Because talking, yelling, screaming, whatever tactics there is out there, none of it works at that point in time. So the last resort, or I guess some people do it as a first resort, but...
That's scary.
Yeah, right. At some point at this fight, they resort to the silent treatment because it really, unfortunately, is painfully effective. Because the other person doesn't like being shunned, ignored, pretending they don't exist. And it's just downright rude. And it's not healthy for the relationship. But it does get the attention. And when someone's being silent towards you, the best way to handle that is say, I love you. I know we're having a disagreement. We will talk when you're ready to talk. And let it go.
That's what a man should do.
Yes. He still needs to acknowledge that he cares and loves her. She wants that reassurance. She also wants the reassurance that even though you're in this disagreement, that there is safety there, that this relationship isn't going anywhere, and that you two will resolve this. This will get resolved, and we will deal with it when we're both able to talk civilly.
Well, hey, until you come down from that, it's game on for a hunting trip with the guys. Or go out and have a few beers,
right.
At least.
Let her stew for, a day or two.
Wow, I was semi-joking.
No, but I mean, she needs her space. Let her be angry. But if you're in the wrong, because you could be right or you could be wrong, but let's take the aspect that if you're wrong, you're in the wrong, you screwed up, whatever the case is. At some point, you need to swallow your pride and say, you know what? I love you. I'm wrong. I shouldn't have done X, Y, Z. And from now on, this is how we're going to deal with it. Is that good for you? Now, that isn't going to work if you're in the right. Sometimes you didn't do anything wrong, and you shouldn't have to apologize for being wrong. But let her know that you're not happy with the situation, that you two are not happy at the moment, but that you would love to get this problem resolved. You want to talk about it, and you want to do it in a loving way.
Well, what comes to mind there is in 14 years of you and I knowing each other, I can count on one hand how many times you've ever gone silent on me.
Yeah, I know, right?
And I deserved it every time. I mean, I'll be the first to admit it. But what if we're in a relationship with a woman who does this twice a week and we don't know when to duck? I mean, was that a woman who wasn't ready to be one half of a great relationship, or is that actually more normal? Is that more par for the course for women than, I don't know, you are? Are you just special? I mean, what is a guy to do when it isn't always his fault and he's dealing with this all the time? Run away?
Well, if you're in a relationship and you're committed together, the best thing to do is, she may not know any better. She may be doing this because her mom did this. Her sisters have done this. Her whole family has done this. This is what she views as normal. And it may not be something you're used to. And like I said, it's rude and it's not exactly the best resort to having a peaceful relationship between husband and wife or between couples. But when you have that situation, it's happening a lot. When things are calm and there's not anger going on, when you two have time to sit down and have a glass of wine or whatever the case is, have a very peaceful conversation. Say, I've noticed lately that every time we have a disagreement or every time that tensions happen between us, that you go silent on me. And it makes me feel nervous that this relationship is going in the wrong direction. And I want things to work out for us. Can we talk about a better way to deal with our disagreements?
Well, you're assuming she's going to be reasonable. I mean, step one, gentlemen, is get into a relationship with someone who's reasonable and be reasonable, because you can't reason with someone who isn't reasonable. And that takes us back to the question we asked a couple minutes ago that we really didn't get to the bottom of, which is it healthy for couples to be in disagreements with each other? Now, I would say something that constitutes a fight is not ever going to be healthy. You and I have never insulted each other.
Never.
And that's because we have self-respect and we respect each other.
And we've never thrown the D word out either.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to divorce you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's awful.
Well, it tears down the safety and security both for the man and the woman.
And women do it more than men do in relationships.
That's because it gets your attention. It's like, I'm going to leave you. And the other person's like, oh, please don't leave. All of a sudden now the person who's begging to stay is lost control. And the other person who's threatening it gains control.
And also the person who's leveling an ultimatum every time things go crosswise in a relationship is the one who feels weak. They feel like they have to somehow wrestle back control. And that is so eye-rollingly tiresome to the other partner.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And ultimately, when this happens over and over again, the other partner gets fed up and say, you know what? You're leaving. So long. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Actually, another thing I want to bring up is something that came up in a coaching call just today as we're recording this. Sometimes women misunderstand or flat out don't understand men the way men don't understand women. And I think there are women out there who just think men don't have any feelings. Like, when all those soldiers stormed Normandy Beach back in World War II, I mean, they were just a bunch of, dunder-headed guys who were robots with guns. Not that they were scared to the point of puking and fearing for their lives. And I think this is immaturity and lack of life wisdom on a woman's part. Just feel like they can say or do whatever they want to a guy, and he better just take it, because after all, men aren't allowed to have feelings. They don't have feelings. And that puts the woman always in defense mode, as if she's not going to have any leverage emotionally with a guy at all. And of course, we as guys are taught to, man up and shove it all under, which, is probably one of the bricks of the toxic masculinity debate that has a little bit of merit. Overall, I've been very, very frequently outspoken on this show about how much I think the Gillette commercials and so forth are hurting us, and that masculinity is being stolen from us, and that men should still be men. But we're allowed to have emotions, and we're allowed to say when enough's enough. And I think women should recognize that men have emotions. And likewise, I think men should expect women to be logical and be able to make sense of things. And when we misunderstand each other, it comes from a point of disrespect, right? Comes back full circle, and that's when the insults start. And when we don't understand each other, that's when the fear of each other comes around, and we start disliking each other. And that's, of course, fatal to a relationship.
And that's when we resort to tricks and games and silent treatment and yelling and pretending that we don't have, we're not affected by the emotion of the situation, and I'm not going to acknowledge the situation. So all these things come into play when we're not understanding each other.
Right. And that's all the dysfunctional components of fighting and disagreeing. However, show me a couple who never disagrees about anything. And a lot of times I will show you a relationship where someone's controlling the other person.
They're not having a conversation, that's for sure.
Right. Because we're going to disagree sometimes. We can get downright tiffy with each other if we're hangry, But the thing is, we trust each other enough to let the other person go on their rant. And because we're not insulting each other, we're not taking it personally.
Right. Give you your space, do your thing, come back when you're, happier and less moody. Same thing for me.
Well, of course. And, the thing is, we trust each other enough. We know we love each other, respect each other, adore each other enough that we have the freedom to do this, to be ourselves, even when we're at our worst in front of each other. There's no dressing it up. There's no lipsticks on pigs around here. And we are who we are. And I think that's one of the things that makes our relationship feel less like work because, we're there for each other. We're a sounding board. And it's never permanent. It's never more than a couple hours. Usually we can eat something or take a nap or have sex. It clears it up.
I remember the most recent disagreement that we had was this last trip that we're going to take. You came to bed and you're like, honey, I really don't think it's a good idea that we, go on this particular road trip this particular weekend. And you laid out the reasons. And, I didn't say anything. You said, we're just not going to do it because we can't. You listed all the real reasons for not doing it. John had just broke his arm. He's going to be in pain. He can't have fun. Et cetera, et cetera. Et cetera, et cetera. There's this long laundry list.
All of them good points.
All of them good points. I couldn't argue it. You were right.
But I feel guilty also for disappointing you because I knew you wanted to do this.
But that upset you.
Of course, it upset me more than you.
It did.
And yet you were still driving a little bit to do it and kind of sweep it under the carpet like, oh, yeah, we're just going to do it. You'll get over yourself. And that's when I had to raise my voice a little bit and go, look, I'm serious. And that's where the trust comes in.
Right.
Because, sometimes we have to assert ourselves.
Right. And I had to admit, you're right. There's no getting around it. We really shouldn't go on that trip. No sane person would have done it. So I had to come to my senses.
And this goes both ways. There are times when I'm going on a rant about something and I'm being unreasonable and I'm not going anywhere but in circles. And you level set me and go, all right, well, which is it? What's it going to be? We're sick of hearing you go around in circles. And that's when I have to, be a man and make a decision. And everybody's going to be better off because of it. So, this desire to be perfect and never argue that some couples have, first of all, it's Pollyanna-ish and unreasonable. But I think, the bottom line here is, you disagree as long as you stay civil with each other and you don't call each other names and you're not fighting. It's a good thing that you're honest and truthful and transparent with each other enough to show some emotion when it's time. And I think that trust is really, really helpful. Now, conflict over things that are serious breaches of trust, like let's say one person cheats on the other.
Wow, that's pretty heavy stuff, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. We've never had something like that. But there are also times that aren't even necessarily a breach, but just, life happens and something that's a bit of a crisis happens to the family. I think in those situations, those latter situations, you got to remember you're a team and you're going through life together. And it feels like work if dating and relating is a team sport and your adversary is on the opposite sides versus being on the same side, on the same team. Now, when there's a breach, I think you've got to go ahead and blow off your steam emotionally and not come to any hasty judgments. Sit down, relax, sleep on it, come to your own senses, then come together and communicate. Now, we haven't had that sort of thing happen in our relationship. But based on past experiences in my dating life when I was a lot younger and more immature, and based on a whole lot of coaching after almost 14 years.
Right.
I would say that that's the way to go. You don't want to say things you're going to regret because that'll exacerbate the situation. You can't make a knee-jerk reaction and just up and leave. The silent treatment in that case might not be a bad thing because it could keep you from saying something you regret. And, regardless of how you described it earlier, I think some people actually level the silent treatment for that very reason. So they don't say something they regret. It's self-control.
Especially men. Men tend to use that one more often. Like, I'm going to, explode.
I just need to go out and breathe.
Leave me alone, woman.
Right.
Trust me.
And a lot of women... And a lot of women understand that. They're crystal clear about that. That doesn't make the guy violent or toxic or horrible. It makes us human. And, men have testosterone, and it's for good reason. And when we know how to harness it and not lash out or hurt those who we love, in some ways, it almost makes the woman horny.
Well, it shows wisdom, too.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like, hey, look, he has some horsepower. He knows how to use it. But just not against me.
I know, right?
Anyway, I think this has been a really good discussion on how couples can, I don't want to say argue successfully because we've used that term before. Yeah, but I think, Emily, it's reasonable to think that if a couple comes together with a really good, solid baseline foundation of getting along and having those foundational commonalities that they share that we discussed earlier, and that they trust each other and they actually like each other. I mean, we know couples who can't stand each other. I mean, what are they doing? I mean, this is masochistic. But assuming you have all those check boxes handled, there are going to be times where we have to trust each other enough to disagree. And that also is very healthy in that it shows that everybody's thoughts and opinions matter in this relationship. Nobody's being suppressed.
And it shows that you have communication going on because you feel free enough to express your thoughts and emotions, and your spouse or your loved one feels the same way as well. They can express themselves and give their opinions. It's when two people or one or the other doesn't want to talk about sensitive subjects, the breakdown in communication happens, and it's destructive to the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big part of getting to know each other. This is a big part of finding out your wants and needs and hopes and fears so I can lead better as a husband.
Well, it's scary because you have to put yourself out there and trust that when you open up to this individual, that they're not going to hurt you emotionally.
Right. Or physically. Yeah.
Hopefully not, but if you picked wisely, they won't.
Yeah. And that vulnerability that's born of courage really, really does wonders for a wonderful relationship.
It's
absolutely
worth it.
Yeah. Well, what a great conversation, Emily. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. And guys, if you want to listen to more of Emily and I together, go to www.scotandemily.com/podcast and grab a big handful of our other show called X and Y on the Fly. One of the reasons we're doing this particular podcast together is because we plan on doing new, fresh episodes of X and Y on the Fly for you in real short order, so you can look forward to those. Once again, that's at www.scotandemily.com/podcast. And remember, my name only has one T in it. And guys, if you have not yet visited www.mountaintoppodcast.com, go over there and get you some. We have show notes. We have pictures of our guests, including my lovely wife.
Thank you.
And you can get a transcript of every episode from number 150 on. You can also check out the YouTube version of each episode and grab a couple free special reports. Get in on my daily newsletter, which you should be getting. It'll have actionable advice in there for you on how to get better with women. And it's going to come into your inbox every day, and it's going to be fluff-free. It's going to be the real deal. And finally, if you haven't talked to me yet for 25 minutes, you definitely want to do that. There's a little button in the upper right-hand corner of the site. It's a red button. Click that and get on my schedule for a free 25 minutes. We can talk about what's going on in your life and see if a coaching program is right for you. And until I talk to you again real soon on the next episode of the Mountaintop Podcast, this is Scott McKay from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X and Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X and Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.